Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this session of the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee. Today we have 4 items before us. Our first item will be to review the FY25-30 Biannual Recommended General Government CIP program for our TEBS, our Technology and Enterprise Business Solutions. We have a packet created by Dr. Costas, and I will first turn it over to him and thank our TEBS department for coming over and representatives from OMB. But first, Dr. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm Costas Terigas. I'm your IT advisor, and I'm here to give you a brief introduction to the packet, and then I'll turn it over to my friends from the Technology and Enterprise Business Solutions Department of the county. In general, there are major trends in technology. Security has become an issue. Artificial intelligence is banging on the door. Software as a service is something new. We don't run software. Somebody else runs the software. As a consequence, the investments that you are asked to make in infrastructure, the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program, are vital to preserve and secure our county operations. The budget you're looking at is not a budget of TEBS. It's really a budget for the county. TEBS is actually providing the infrastructure for much needed services. One last thing that I wanted to say is that you have been wise enough to support this thing called FiberNet for 20 years almost. Well, the chickens have come home to roost. That investment is really gold today. People are looking for infrastructure like with the quality of our FiberNet system. So, and you have it in front of you as a CIP item. The last thing I would urge you to do is to think of the TEB submissions for CIP as phases that have to be sustained, not simply one phase and then fight for the second phase, fight for the third phase. We have to start agreeing that TEBS has the green light to secure the needed infrastructure. Those are just some opening brief remarks I wanted to make, and there are 4 items, and we can go down the items as you wish.
Great. Before that, I just wanted to see, Dr. Roper, if you wanted to add anything or opening remarks.
Yes, I would like to say that all of these various initiatives all lead to one thing, and that's productivity and gains in having information and data for the county to make good decisions. There's an infrastructure, of course, that is required to be maintained for our data to travel from the county to the Equinix data center or to our data center. But overall, we are embarking on several initiatives that will lead us to the implementation of artificial intelligence. We had our bot go live a few weeks ago for the 311 call center, and basically what we're trying to do is kind of work on some areas that of course have gone unvisited for quite a while in terms of modernization, but also to stay focused on why we do this. And it is for us to be able to bring information to the council and to administration, to bring data that makes sense and helps us to make better decisions. And that's why we're basically focused right now on a lot of data initiatives, and some of what you saw, Mrs. Stewart, in Taipei is where we really would like to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Roper. Dr. Terigas, do you want to take us to the packet?
Yes, indeed. I'd like you to turn to page 2. On the top is a summary of all 4 decisions that you have to make today. And the first one is county building network wiring. It's an upgrade for every single county building, starting with an inventory and then going to the actual upgrade itself. The reason for it is simple. We have a high-grade, high-speed network moving data from place to place, but from the enter of the building to the desktop of the county user, we have a very slow system. So what we need to do is to improve the networking that takes the data from the edge of the building inside the building. This is an investment that the county expects to make $2 million, $2,062,000 this year, another $2 million next year, and for the foreseeable future. I've raised as a question the coordination between our General Services Department and TEBS, and I see it represented here from GSA in terms something comes up. So my recommendation is to approve as submitted, and I have raised 3 questions, and the answers I've received you've seen. They're adequate for the questions I raised. Thank you.
I'll turn to my colleagues and see if anyone has any questions. Councilmember Katz.
So while we're doing these various years of, and I understand why we have it in phases, are we actually correcting it, or we're not going to wait till the end when we have all the money, right? We're going to be correcting some buildings as we go along? Yes? And do we know what buildings they would be? Is there a blueprint?
Yes, we do to a degree. So, for example, Hungerford is one of the key priority buildings, and it has old wiring that's creating significant challenges. So part of the funding will be used to do a complete audit of all the buildings so we can prioritize them, but the plan will be to prioritize the worst infrastructure that at the most critical sites first, and then move through that. And it'll probably be, wiring can typically last about 10 years, so once we refresh a building, it should be good for at least 10 years, depending on how technology develops.
And I did want to mention, Dr. Torregas said I did appreciate your technology and an analogy of chickens coming home to roost. That really is perfect. Thank you very much.
Council President Friedson.
Yeah, thank you. Just along those lines, do we have like a technology strategic plan where we know exactly, the timeline for regular maintenance and the cost, that we know the timeline for when, hardware and software is going to come in and out of service, and just the, totality of kind of where we are in the process, what the costs are, how we can spread out those costs and make sure that we don't have chickens that come home to roost, that we tend to the chickens or something along those lines?
So I would say yes and no. So I would say we are still modernizing from lack of investment for maybe the last 10, 15 years. So the first thing that we did was a business continuity study so that we could understand where all of the what we call tier 1 systems are in the county. There was really no list of applications, so we had to shore that up. And then if you look at the business continuity study, which is similar to what you just asked for, it shows where those critical facilities are, where those critical systems are, part of the strategy to move to the Equinix data center. So yes, we do. And we keep very strict guidelines around our projects. So if you want timelines and those kinds of things, we have a formal project management office that happens. This study, though, is going to basically give us the go forward in terms of where we want to focus first, where we would get the most out of the investment that we make in terms of the modernization of infrastructure. So if you think about a building that would have maybe an electrical system that was 15 years old, then you would begin to understand that there are certain things that would run under that electrical system where we're having problems with outages. These buildings need to be modernized. So yes, we do. We kind of had to start from the ground up, finding out just where our systems are located. We had servers that were on-prem that we've now moved to the data center. So it's very complex, to be honest with you, and we've made light years of progress. I believe, but much more to be done.
Yeah, I appreciate the light years of progress. That's clear to me. There's a lot of work that has happened to essentially stabilize the patient here and make sure that we're not at risk of system failures or vulnerabilities and others. I think we're moving in that direction. Perhaps we're pretty close to being there. What I would like to see for moving forward is more than business continuity. I mean, business continuity is kind of like baseline, which is critical, but is really to understand these projects and the totality of everything else that we're doing, what we expect, not just this year, but next year, the year after, because the challenge that we get on a lot of the technology pieces is by the time they get to us, it's like fund this, or the world falls apart, or the world is falling apart, and if you don't fund this, it's going to get dramatically worse. And it's not, I don't think we're getting ahead of it enough. And part of that was because that was the situation that the department was in, because it hadn't been funded, to Dr. Trega's point. But I think as we move out of that, as we have gotten to a better place, which you have made those light years of progress, I would like to get to that point where it's, okay, here, to the GO committee and to the council, here is our plan over the next 5 to 7 years.
May I add?
Yes, please.
So I'm going to respectfully disagree with just the fact that today technology can't be planned out 5 to 7 years. So if you think about the fact that AI, the release of AI last November of 2023 changed our world overnight. Now we're dealing and developing strategies to not only protect our data, but to understand how our organization can use AI. The speed of technology today won't allow, you could write a 5-year plan, it would sit on a shelf somewhere, and it probably wouldn't be consumed by most folks. I would say, President Friedson, that we could probably provide, or we have, like a 2 to 3 year plan, and some of the things that we can control will be a part of that plan going forward. But I people pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for 5-7 year technology plans that change on a dime. So yeah, so I
understand what you're saying there, but I also don't necessarily totally agree with you either. I mean, yes, AI has changed everything, but in some ways it's changed nothing. I mean, the technology is changing, and so the application of what you're going to have to work on and what the specifics of the project, but you still have to wire the buildings. You still have to, do the blocking and tackling, and those are the areas, in a lot of ways that we've been woefully behind. I mean, in some ways, I think that the exciting, new, shiny objects in technology are the easy part. That's the thing that everybody wants to fund. The hard part is, the blocking and tackling, the technological infrastructure that allows everything else to happen. So, I'm not suggesting that you commit to a mainframe technology or, to something that is, obviously going to be outdated 7 years from now, but just thinking through and understanding so that something that comes before us, we know that, this is part of the plan and here's how it fits in, because, the reality is when things come to us, I mean, maybe I'm alone in this, but it's a very ad hoc thing. Now, you may feel like it's part of your plan and it may be something that you understand, holistically, but we don't, because we're not really part of understanding that process. So, you're the technology experts. I am anything but a technology expert. If I can log in to my applications, I feel like it's a good day. So, I will admit that, but I just, at least in the foundational blocking and tackling of technological infrastructure, having an understanding of the hardware, the software, the wiring, what that is going to look like, where we have to make investments, when we're going to be behind in those investments, and when it could catch up to us, I think would be helpful so that we avoid these end of days. In reality, I think that will help you a lot because it will make sure that the department has the resources that it needs to be proactive, not reactive to infrastructure challenges and technology. But I think having a little bit more of the broader context of what these decisions are being made, and I think would be helpful. So with that, I'll yield.
So if I could ask that maybe Dr. Tregas, that you send us the business continuity study, so we have that particularly as we are moving forward to the operating budget, which is always a bit more difficult. And I will say, given what Council President Friedson said, that in response to Dr. Tregas's questions on, I think it was question 1, it was said that the audit for the facilities is going to take about a year, and you all then reflected in the budget estimates for FY26. And I think what we're hearing from Council President Friedson is that let's hear about that before we get to the budget conversation in FY26. So as you all are doing that audit, when you have more information, maybe we could schedule a time earlier during the winter as you're preparing the budget so that the GO committee can have more information regarding the long-term plan. Does that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay, great. That work? The other thing just on this point, I did want to note, because it is something that this committee has talked a great deal about, which is the cable fund. And it was noted here in a staff question regarding the cable fund. And I don't know, Director Roper, if you just want to kind of get that on the record on as we're looking at the CIP and as we're discussing the cable fund, how TEBS is looking at particularly the PEG money in the cable funds and addressing that.
Yes, Joe Webster, Chief Broadband Officer. A lot of the PEG funding is targeted, and we have limited flexibility in what we can spend it on. But we have been working with OMB to move things out of the cable fund where we can into the general fund to help alleviate the pressure. And I think from an overall perspective, TEBS has taken on a large share of the reductions in the cable funding perspective. And I will also mention, just in response to President Friedson's comment, that we have been working with TEBS and our budget people in TEBS and technology people working with OMB so that we have a plan going forward for refresh of this infrastructure. So from a network perspective, FiberNet, the different elements of FiberNet, we now have a very solid understanding of let's say a 7-year useful life, and we're building into the CIP budget a refresh cycle. The equipment is of various ages, so it doesn't all need to be refreshed on year 7. So we're building into the CIP funding these plans for different elements for the underlying infrastructure, where we hope to avoid surprises going forward as it's a systemized approach to our budgeting going forward. We do have the occasional elements like the DWDM refresh, which was on our horizon but is being pulled forward due to other circumstances that kind of require us to pull that forward a bit.
Great. All right. Seeing no objections to this one? Okay. All right. Well, that was a good transition to the next item. Director Torres.
The next item is dense wave division multiplexing, or DWDM replacement. The technology that underlies this request is complicated. Suffice it to say that we cannot guarantee uptime for the various needs of data transfers with the existing equipment, and this is a necessary one-time expenditure. So one of the key reasons I recommended approval as proposed is because it's deep in the technology infrastructure that we have, and it's technology that we can no longer find replacement parts and support for from the vendors in the community. So it's a necessary item.
We can continue.
Great. On page 5 of my memo is digital equity, and this is the digital equity part that connects to the infrastructure that TEBS and the county executive is building to reach our underserved population with high-speed internet services for education, for job finding, for a whole variety of purposes. It's a very commendable effort. You'll hear more about it on the operating budget, as well as the Economic Development Committee as well. But today we're here to see the investments that are being made, and I specifically ask, where are these investments being made? And you have a map, you have a table, so that you have a sense of how things are moving. And again, I share your stated objective to know things in advance. This is a bit in advance, but perhaps your idea of doing it off budget so that we're not pressured to come up with decisions on the budget itself, and more of a strategic discussion with tactical overtones would be a wonderful idea in the fall, winter. So my recommendation is to adopt.
Any questions on this one? No, we can continue.
The last one is the chicken project, FiberNet. FiberNet is really an amazing journey that the county has made. If you go to Circle 9 of the packet, you see the infrastructure and the sites that are served. The one thing that is very important is there's one little strand that goes to the west and then crosses the river into Ashburn. That's the key to everything. We have a high-speed connection to the internet kind of center of the universe in Ashburn, Virginia, and that is what will allow TEBS to move forward with a very, very robust industry-grade FiberNet system. You'll notice in the actual expenditure column, which our friends from OMB can probably underline, that monies for this are being shifted out of the cable fund, but I think right now they're still being transferred into the operating budget. But long term, these are critical investments that should not be made from a fund that is constantly decreasing, as this committee has aptly underlined for years. I did raise a few questions about FiberNet. You have the executive branch's answers to them. So my recommendation again is to support the executive's efforts as proposed.
And just to confirm, yes, that we are shifting all of the FiberNet funding into the general fund. We made the strategic decision 2 years ago to start making that transition out of the less stable cable fund because this is such a critical piece of our county's infrastructure.
Thank you. Any questions on this? No, I think we're good.
Can I just make one comment about FiberNet? FiberNet is an asset for the county and should be thought about that as such. So there are some opportunities going forward to look at other ways to bring revenue into the county with that asset. I just needed to make that comment.
It's a good comment to make, particularly as we're discussing the cable funds and having that ongoing conversation. So thank you very much, Dr. Torregas, and to the TEBS team, to OMB, for coming out today. We look forward to moving this forward to the full council and having you back again to talk about the operating budget. Thank you very much. All right. We are joined by our colleague, Councilmember Lukey, who is here, I think, for a later item. But thank you for joining us. And we are going to move through items now 2 and 3, which we're looking at capital improvement amendments to our general government county offices and other improvements and other general government, sort of a catch-all of all things. Yep. So, Mr. Mia, I'm going to turn it over to you. I thank our representatives from DGS being here today, and also OMB back again. All right, Mr. Mia, you want to walk us through this?
Okay. Well, good morning. On page 1, you'll see a summary section. Just very briefly, I'll cover other general government category first, item 3, because there's not much to discuss there. That's the true catch-all category. In the past, there have been DGS administered projects. There are a few that are currently in the closeout status as they're wrapping up. But for now, in terms of active projects, the only projects remaining are ABS administered, which will be reviewed by the Economic Development Committee on April 25th alongside their operating budget. Also, as a matter of housekeeping, the executive transmitted his March CIP amendments on March 14th. Those will be covered in this briefing as well. So we'll have all of the DGS administered projects will be covered on today's session. If you turn to page 2 of the packet on section B, I just did want to kind of bring up the infrastructure maintenance task force report, focusing on DGS. Based on that report, DGS identified 3 major areas in their portfolio that are significantly underfunded to the tune of $36 million per year. So just as a reminder, that's where we are with DGS currently in their administered projects. There is hope in the form of the capital asset management system that was funded in the CIP in FY23 that we're expecting to deploy in the coming fiscal year. That will give us more information on what the identified needs truly could be and how to best effectively manage our portfolio. And again, as a reminder, the committee has previously asked DGS to explore the development of an equipment reserve fund. I think with the new asset management system, that will lead to that discussion in the near future. Beyond that, on Section C, starting on page 2, Section C, I did mention what are called the consent projects. These are essentially our level of effort projects that are only increasing because of the addition of FY 29 and 30. Beyond the issue of some of these being underfunded, there are no real significant issues related at this time. They are funded primarily by GO bonds or current revenue, so that means that we may need to make minor adjustments as we approach reconciliation to overall balance the CIP. But staff is approving all of these projects, consent projects, as they have been recommended by the CE.
Thank you. And Director Dice, I apologize I didn't give you a moment if you wanted to have a couple of opening remarks.
No, that's.
I was so excited to get into your budget.
Yeah, I'm sure you were. No, this is, I've often said, this is the stuff that people don't see. A lot of the things that we're doing, we do for client departments, which has an outward face for the public. These are a lot of those things that people don't see. County's got a massive investment in real estate and buildings, and it's important for us to maintain those. Financial constraints over the last decade or more have prevented us from doing that, but we hope to get back on a right track. Mr. Mia mentioned the asset management system. I'm sure we have some questions about that. We're happy to update you on those and other projects. Thank you.
Great, terrific. Any questions on the consent projects? No? Okay, we can move forward, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, turning to some of the more substantive projects that have changes in them in the recommended CIP. We have one new project that was transmitted last week, or 2 weeks ago, as a March amendment. That's the County Fleet EV Charging Station CIP. The executive is requesting $750,000 in current revenue in FY 25 to build out a total of 6 level 2 chargers and 4 level 3 fast chargers at county facilities throughout the county in various geographic locations. Council staff is recommending approval. This is really supporting the ongoing transition of the county's public fleet vehicles to electric vehicles over the next several years.
Great. Any comments or? Nope, we can continue.
Okay. Turning to page 4, section E, these are projects with scope and or cost changes. The first project is the building envelope repair level of effort project. We have a cost increase of about $3.1 million due to addition of 2930 to the 6-year CIP period, and as well as a $1.4 million cost increase in FY 25. That's due to exterior work at the pre-release center that will need to be completed. Staff is recommending approval.
Okay. Any questions? No, we can continue.
Okay. Project number 2 is a council office building, or building we're currently in. This is an amendment being proposed by council staff. We have identified needs on the first floor public entrance and the 7th floor hearing room. We are requesting a total of $971,000 in FY 25 to complete various accessibility and modernization upgrades to those 2 areas. The goal of the first floor is to make it more accessible, more well lit, safer, and more easy to find for visitors who are entering the building from the garage. On the 7th floor, we are looking at both IT upgrades and physical renovations to essentially modernize a room that has not been updated in decades, bringing it to a level of technology and usability comparable to what we have here in this main hearing room. Beyond that, happy to answer any questions. DGS staff is here to provide updates on both the ongoing cafeteria work as well as the proposed scope of work.
Great. So I'll jump in here and say this is so needed moving forward. Not just for us here in the council building who work here, particularly our staff who are there, who are at the entrance. They need a much nicer workspace than they have right now. It gets really cold and really hot. They feel the extremes there. In addition to that, I know, Mr. Mia, you and I have had conversations about the signage and accessibility issues because we have a real issue when people come to visit us and we hold public hearings here, how to access our building. And we need to do a much better job of that, and particularly for people who have mobility issues, we want to make sure that they can easily access our building. And right now, that's that's not the case. Looking forward to moving this forward, and I think you said I don't need to pile on the 7th floor and the issues that we have there, but that is also greatly needed. Before I turn it over to Director Dice, I just didn't know if we had comments from.
And well said, Council Vice President. This building, which I've always called the People's Building, really has needed some great additions. And you've already touched on the security guards on the first floor. We need to figure out how to keep them warmer and cooler. It's not a good situation for them and people coming in to the building. And then the other thing is, and I understand we're talking about where the dumpsters are. Mr. Dice, you made the point that this is for what people don't see, but this is what people do see. And the dumpsters, as they're coming in from the parking lot, from the parking garage, really, I believe, and I understand we want to change someday where the gas station is located, but I believe while we're doing that, we should spend a few dollars putting a fence around the dumpsters. We would not allow any business to have a situation the way that we have it, so that the public sees exactly the way it is. I don't believe it would be that expensive, but I believe we should do that.
I'll turn to Council President Friedson and then Director Dice to you.
Thank you. First of all, I appreciate, and I think absolutely for the staff who works very hard here every day, but most importantly for the public, the entrance into the building that should see the most number of residents participating in local government, the body that oversees the $7.1 billion of their taxpayer dollars, is not particularly welcoming. It's not easy to navigate, and it is not hospitable by any stretch of the imagination. It's tough enough that you pass a couple dumpsters and walk through or roll through a gas station in order to enter the public building. There have been some upgrades to other parts of the building, but not really the public spaces until very recently. So I think it's really important that we do that, and then ensuring that the 7th floor becomes as viable a committee and council meeting space as this one is central to us doing our work. I did want to get an update on the cafeteria, so I was hoping we could turn to that. So I'm sure we'll hear about that. But the cafeteria, to me, the two most important public spaces in this building are the cafeteria, where many residents and groups gather or gathered, before and after council sessions, and the entrance to and from. Really, frankly, more important, I think, even than this hearing room, even though this is where the business gets done, because that is really where the congregating space is. So I just wanted to get an update on that, and obviously it's important for our staff as well. But we work for the public. This is the public's building, and ultimately we need to make sure we have a building that serves their needs as well.
Thank you. All right, Director Dice, please give us an update.
My turn.
Yeah.
Well, just to frame the discussion, remember that the council office building is, in fact, 5 buildings built over different times and connected to each other. Instead of constructing a new council office building, we spent almost the same amount of money renovating these 5 buildings. The project is ongoing. The priority was first to improve and expand the council offices to meet the increase in the size of the council and modernize those spaces. If you'll recall, some of you were not here at the time when the heating, ventilating, and air conditioning throughout this building was problematic, worse than it has been in your experience, worse than it was in your present experience. We spent a lot of money doing that, again, working on the parts that people don't see, and including this chamber. And the work is still ongoing. It's been an issue of funding. We have worked to improve the front of the building but you're correct in that the major entrance used, particularly for public meetings, and I point to the tremendous work that DGS staff did with the contractor in improving the auditorium on the first level. Most people don't see that. I think it's an underutilized space, but it is a lovely space and suitable for public use. No one's going to dispute that that entrance, which is the one that you take from the parking lot into the building from the first level, and the accessible entrance needs some work, has for some time, and we've advocated for that. The challenge, of course, is that is both an access point and a utility alleyway. So trying to come up with a solution where we can deal with both and look at other options is something that DGS staff has undertaken recently. So we do have plans to beautify the first floor entrance, auditorium level entrance, including canopies similar to those in the front of the building or between the parking garage and the employee and council member access entrances in the courtyard. So there'll be canopies that'll provide for coverage from folks coming from the garage to the entrance, some beautification, changing some other things. I can't widen the alleyway, unfortunately, so that's presenting some challenge as far as accessibility, because that's also the avenue where ADA vans are parking, since the garage height is not sufficient for parking in the garage. So we're combining all of those strategies and have plans to do that, including coming up with ideas for beautifying the hallway coming down the what I have not so affectionately called the Pentagon access hallway, for those of you that have walked the hallowed halls of the Pentagon. So there's obviously some challenges represented by just the physical nature of a very old building that never anticipated the full extent of its current use. That includes the former cafeteria, and I say former, it won't be a cafeteria again, it'll be a cafe and a conference space. This building has lacked sufficient organized and suitable conference space, so that whole floor or area of the second floor has been demolished and will be reconstructed into meeting room space and a cafe. A solicitation for the cafe operator is on the street right now. We are soliciting local small businesses to operate that. To facilitate its success, we have had other operations in there in the past. The problem is that it's not readily, or hasn't been readily accessible as a viable commercial enterprise from the street, because anyone coming in had to go through security. So reconfiguring the second floor lobby access so that folks will still be able to come into the cafe or enjoy community meeting space and not have to go through security to do so. Security will still be a feature for those wanting to enter into the offices and hearing rooms of the council office building proper, but the cafe and those other meeting spaces will be open for public use. And hopefully that will ensure some commercial viability for that operation. So that's going on. The seventh floor hearing room, we are unable, it's cost prohibitive to replace the windows in that building, but we are looking at some interim solutions, perhaps some vapor barriers on the interior space to prevent any draftiness. And new seating is being will be replace the existing. As uncomfortable as council members are behind the dais, imagine those of us sitting in those chairs out in front. So that seating will be replaced, and the dais will be reconfigured to provide more accessibility in the rear of that space as well. So all of this is going on. It all is within the scope of the project, and we're looking forward to the getting that work done in accordance with council schedules. That's the tricky part, to make sure. We've been in the seventh floor hearing room when drills were going on the sixth floor, and I've noted Mr. Katz's chagrin at that that eventuality. So we'll work with council staff in making sure that works coordinated.
Yeah, Councilmember Katz.
And thank you. And I always think I'm at the dentist office when the only other thing I wanted to mention for what you call the Pentagon corridor as you'd walk into the building on the first floor, we have a good opportunity once again to combine with Montgomery College for their artwork. And if we could have displays on ongoing changing of artwork along there, I think people would enjoy seeing that, and I think the students from Montgomery College would enjoy displaying it.
We'll certainly consider that. I'll reach out to the college. The most difficult thing about that space, any long corridor is uncomfortable, but the most difficult thing about that space is the real low ceiling with the utilities. I feel like I'm using another analogy, walking through a submarine with all the pipes and things overhead. We've looked at doing something about that. There's really nothing we can do about it, so we'll try and make the space as pleasant as possible. I understood your suggestion, and I think it's something that we should pursue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and I think keeping the council staff and the council members updated will be excellent. I do want to thank Mr. Mia for his work to bring in local businesses for lunch and places that we can use here in the council building while the construction is happening in the cafeteria. So thank you.
If I can add one more thing, because
absolutely.
it was on your list of questions, the reconfiguration of that floor does include also a vestibule for what we call air damming, so that we can create a cold space transition to warm space, and a desk in that lobby.
Good.
So, again, reconfiguring the security operations on both the first and second floors.
Great. Council President Friedson.
Yeah, do we have timing on that and any specifics besides this report that can be shared with our offices for our awareness?
I could get that to you. I'll provide a follow-up memo on the schedule. I don't have that in front of me right now. No, design is substantially completed on the cafe area, except we're holding off until the operator is under contract, because we want them to provide some input as an expert in the food services as to how that's configured. That design is done, as you know, as I mentioned, the demolition is done. I don't have a schedule for the exterior improvements, but we can follow up with you and get that.
That'd be great if you could follow up. And then who on our team, on council staff, is involved in the design? And
Mr. Mia has been our point of contact throughout this
we've
process.
worked with the deputy director as well as the executive director as a team to sign off on review designs and review the RFP and all of that. So.
Okay, great. Well, on the specifics of the designs, I think if that could be shared with the committee and with council members specifically, I think that would be.
Yeah, the bulk of the work is, in fact, waiting on your and council's approval of the funding. So,
thanks.
Great. Perfect. All right. Well, I think there's approval to move forward on that one. Why don't we go to the next item?
All right. Item number 3 on page 5 is the Energy Conservation MCG project. This has executives recommending a significant increase of about $39.8 million over the 6-year period. This is to bring county buildings to compliance with BEPS, both the county BEPS and the state BEPS requirements. The county BEPS, of course, is currently, the regulations have been transmitted. They have not been approved. They are under council review. But the 40 million or so is really a placeholder amount. You'll see increases in the first 3 years of the CIP. That's to essentially perform building facility assessments to get a true cost estimate of what we need. But this is essentially the county's commitment towards making our buildings comply with BEPS.
Great. Any questions on that? All right. Seeing none, we'll keep moving.
Page 7, project number 4. Item number 4 is the facility planning MCG. The executive transmitted an amendment in March to add the Montgomery Village Recreation Center facility study in FY25 as $50,000 of current revenue. This was at the request of Councilmember Sales and Lutke to add this to the facility planning work plan. Council staff is recommending approval.
Cool. Any comments from committee members? No?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Councilmember Katz.
If I could, it's my understanding, and Mr. Hassan, being the former Gaithersburg Planning Director, is certainly aware of this, but it's my understanding that the great possibility for this is the land that the city of Gaithersburg will actually be getting for the Montgomery Village Recreation Center. I don't know whether that would be the official title of that facility. It's needed. We all need to work together to get it, but we certainly need to coordinate as quickly as we can, because Gaithersburg City, it's my understanding, is certainly actively working to get that land. And while they are working actively to get that land, we have to make certain that the sizing is going to work for the facility. So.
Good morning, Greg Austin, Department of General Services. I was unaware of that amount of progress in those discussions, that there would actually be dedication for this facility. I know that was a concept discussed early on, but I will get an update from the city. As you know, we are actively working with our colleagues at DOT to assure a bus facility, and that's been the priority as part of that sketch plan. But we'll follow up on the rec center, and obviously that'll be very pertinent as we move forward with facility planning.
Yeah, and just to add, and thank you for all of your collaboration, and I appreciate everybody's openness to multiple potential sites for it, right? So there isn't one particular fixed site that we're exploring, and trying to make sure we're taking advantage of everything that might be available and could be adapted to fit the needs of the area. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we can move forward.
On page 8, item number 5, the Lincoln High School CIP. The CE is recommending $3.5 million in FY25. This is a follow-on to the $1.5 million that was approved in FY23. That first tranche of money was intended to prevent further deterioration of the exterior of the building. This second amount is to do HVAC and electrical work in the interior to essentially bring what DGS describes as a warm lit shell to make it usable for community use. The executive is stated that he intends to create a facility suitable for broad community use. I think those discussions are pretty early on, but that is the ultimate goal, long term.
Great. Director Dykes, did you have any comments on this one? Or
Just to share, we have a design underway to turn this into a multi-use facility. County executive staff is working directly with local community and stakeholder interests to determine how best it can be operated and managed. There's a number of groups, certainly the Baptist Church that met there for a number of years, but there's also great interest in the broader Lincoln Park community, which does not have a facility such as this. So we want to maintain the spirit of the history of this building. It is the people's building, if you will, to turn a phrase on Mr. Cass' earlier comment, and that community deserves a community space that they can use. And so that's our intent. A firm design is not yet finalized, pending input from community stakeholders.
great, Councilmember Katz.
And I thank you for everything you just said, and including, please, keeping the city of Rockville.
Yes.
I mean, this is a facility that's in their municipality, and they too need to be a part of the discussions.
Agreed. Thank you.
Council President Friesen.
Yes, I was going to yield to the district council member to say that, but obviously many of us have had conversations with the current mayor, the former mayor, the council members. This is of significant interest to the city and to the community. It's obviously one of the quintessential historic sites that we have in Montgomery County, something that we need to safeguard and something that we need to ensure has significant public use and also public input into its future use. So I'm glad that is how this is moving forward, and it's doing so in a collaborative way. So appreciate those efforts, and really look forward to adaptive reuse is an exciting opportunity, and to both balance the current needs and future needs that we have with the historic treasure and the history behind it. I think is going to be really important. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And I'll just say, not as the person who represents this area, but having worked closely with the prior mayor and this mayor of Rockville, I know what a priority it is for this community, and I'm glad that we have been able to move forward and do so in time.
Yes.
Because there was real questions about, if we didn't move, what would be able to be saved here. And that would have been really tragic for us to have lost this part of our history and this part of our community. So I'm glad we're moving forward.
Yeah, and if I just footnote to that, the building is in no danger now of being lost. It's stabilized, it's airtight, or it's watertight, it's not airtight. Well, that's part of the challenges with the historic envelope. So, but we'll fix all of that, and I think the interior space will frankly be vastly improved.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. We can continue, Mr. Mio.
Number 6 on page 8, the MCPS bus depot. This will be discussed later today at a joint T&E and EC committee session. Essentially, the executive is recommending $3.5 million, $1 million 25 and $2.5 and 26 to do ongoing preliminary design and community outreach. There's a sister project in the DOT portfolio of the same amounts in the same years that's working on the ride-on portion of this. This project in this category is working on the MCPS portion, but they are essentially one single effort. So we'll know more information this afternoon. And so staff is recommending deferring that recommendation to the joint committee.
Right, and I will be part of that, and I'm sure I will see Councilmember Lukey there as well. But before I turn it over to Councilmember Lukey and Director Dice, I want to make sure, because this is also, I don't know if this will return to go after it goes to the joint committee this afternoon, but want to make sure that my colleagues on this committee have an opportunity to ask any questions they may have. Councilman.
As before, Councilmember Lukey was fortunate enough to represent this area. It was part of my district as well. This has maybe the possibility for finally solving this. I mean, this has been, and I can tell you that everyone involved with this, and I was involved for years with it, everyone involved with this wanted to have a good solution. We just couldn't come up with one. And it sounds like, until something is done, and it ain't done, but it sounds like that this finally could be a possibility where this is a solution. And you know, there were people that said, well, the school system should find it. And the school system said, well, the county should find it, and it's yours. And the bottom line is somebody needs to solve it. And I think Mr. Dice and Mr. Assant and others are the ones who are solving this thing. So I applaud you. I will work with you any way you possibly can. I've lived it. I've lived it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, first, I think it perhaps required Councilmember Lukey's representation to solve the problem, but
He used to be president of this
yeah. So, this has been a huge, challenging issue. I will say, we make lots of commitments, and we're not always so great at keeping this, our commitments, and we need to do better in that regard. This is a commitment that has been made over and over and over to this community to address it, and we need to follow through on that. And there's been lots of work to try to figure out the how, which is much more complicated than it perhaps seems. So I'm glad that it seems like we're moving in a positive direction. I think that's a really good thing. My question, though, is just making sure, obviously the moving forward is key to the Shady Grove Master Plan. That was something that has long been committed and envisioned and needs to be followed through upon. There's a question of ensuring that all the changes and anything that is done, that we're following master plans and sensitive to the impact on master plans. So just wanted to get a sense of that, of kind of the broader context of existing master plans and how, if at all, this will impact that.
Sure. Let me just provide some overall structure and feedback to this, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Assant, who is working on point with this with his development team. For over 14 or 15 years, we've tried conventional solutions to this daunting problem. And it was a couple of years ago, or maybe even less, I just gave up on conventional problems and started to let's look at unconventional things. What we have is an innovative strategy. It's what I call an ENR project, national. It will get national attention. We already have folks out there trying to drum up, with frankly very little difficulty, interest in this project. The thought of putting a depot below a development platform, and the reason for doing that, Mr. Friedson, is to be still in compliance with the Shady Grove sector plan. The folks that invested in homes on the west side of Crabs Branch didn't do so to stare at school buses. And so it is my commitment to them that when we're done, they won't see a school bus unless it has kids in it. So the strategy is, I think, innovative and somewhat bold, and will gain a great deal of interest. And we will certainly and happily keep you updated on the progress. I am meeting with the Shady Grove Alliance on the 10th. I believe Ms. Lutke's staff will be present in that meeting as well, to introduce them to the consultant that we've hired, who will lead the community engagement efforts over the next few months to get stakeholder input, interest, and to conduct public meetings. So I think this is something that we're going to see a great deal of participation in and information exchange. The project will have its own website where people can get updates and provide input. Insofar as the ongoing efforts to comply with the sector plan, I'm going to ask Greg Assant to comment.
Good morning, Greg Austin, Department of General Services again, and thank you for your question. It's been an emphasis as we've moved forward with this concept. And obviously you'll hear more later this afternoon, and it's actually captured in Ms. McGuire's packet. But this consultant that we brought on board to kick off the initial stakeholder engagement process, we've been very clear, and it was part of their the solicitation that they responded to, that their charge was twofold: was to collaborate with us as we collaborate with our client departments, which is MCPS and DOT, on the depot itself, but more importantly, preserve enough of the land at Jeremiah Park so that we're not just building a 45-acre depot as it is today, but actually we're incorporating that, preserving enough land to proceed with the master plan, envisioned master plan of mixed-use development. So that includes a 4-acre school site, a 4-acre park site, mixed-use, mix of uses, including residential. The original preliminary plan for Jeremiah Park was a mix of townhouses and multifamily. I would expect to see more of that, but we also want to introduce the opportunity for some commercial development as well, if that's what the community wants to see. And so far, all of those things are on the table, but that's been a great emphasis as part of the solicitation. It's the consultant's charge to move forward with that, and of course we will be keeping a very close eye as this moves through the input process with all of the stakeholders, that we are preserving enough land, not just to accommodate this particular county infrastructure use, but also for implementation of the Shady Grove sector plan.
Great. Well, I appreciate that. Appreciate the sensitivity to the master plan. As the chair of the zoning committee, planning, housing, and parks, it's something that I care a lot about. I look forward to hearing about the community engagement and yield to the district council member for her views on this. But you know, it is, I know, a huge priority of hers, but it's a broader priority really of the county to fulfill this. I know how important it is, not only to that particular community, but to the county's moving forward with its economic development goals and housing goals and other goals. So thank you for your creativity. It is refreshing. You know, I hope that you will continue to be amenable as you get feedback from the community. It sounds like there's a real interest and willingness to do that as part of real intentional engagement, and I look forward to hearing the results of that, and I'll be tuning into the joint committee session this afternoon.
Great.
If I could just add, I will not be at this afternoon's session.
Okay.
Greg Assant will be leading the discussion in that. I'm embarking on 3 weekends of college visits with so I'll be absent.
Are you going back to college?
Yeah. That's
Nice. All right, Councilmember Lutke.
I was going to say, bless you, Mr. Dice. I've only been on a few thus far, and it's always an adventure. So as their moods and preferences shift with the winds. So one thing I can say, and I can assure my colleagues, is that the residents in this area are very actively engaged and know that master plan inside and out. So they are not shifting with the winds. They are very focused, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate their ongoing feedback and collaboration with both of you and with our office. And I appreciate all the indulging of my polite nagging. I hope it was polite. I think it's been polite, but whether it's me or whether it's my team in my office, that we have been as interested in creative problem solving and thinking outside the box and flexibility in whatever way we can to meet the needs of realizing that master plan. So I very much appreciate that. And, again, just to re-emphasize for my colleagues, there are two components to the bus depot thing that needs to be done, the movement that needs to be done, but emphasize the priority of the MCPS buses, because no development can take place on that land without that, right? And so we need to make sure we're, don't lose sight of the forest for the trees. We stay focused on the bigger objectives there, but certainly know that we think we can meet both needs with the land available. And I am grateful that the stars seem to align nicely with some newer developments in this arena that will help facilitate this project. So thank you all for all your work, and I know we'll be digging into it much deeper as we move forward.
From an accounting standpoint, if you will, you'll see this as listed as two divisions, if you will, of one project, two accounting projects separately. The federal dollars that will be input to this have to be clearly and distinctly delineated between public transportation and schools. So just as a logistical aspect, and in fact, that goes into the design of the facility as well. Ongoing federal funding and for our fleet operations, our ride-on operations, necessitates some, I always call it the Les Nessman approach, the white line down the middle of the road to distinguish between the two. There'll be certainly a lot of joint use, but also some necessary separate uses. And you'll see that in the accounting and reporting strategies as we go forward. I also I don't want to sit here and not be acknowledged. To my far right is my Deputy Director and Chief Operating Officer, Greg Boykin, who is controlling all the operating sides of DGS in case there's questions about the other aspects that we're talking about today. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us. All right. Well, we still have one more item on our agenda today, so I think this one, those of us who are on one of the committees will be getting a deeper dive on this, and I'm sure, as has been noted, there's probably interest from almost every member on council on this project, so I'm sure we'll be hearing from it some more. So, Mr. Meir, why don't we continue?
Okay. There's 3 more projects left for committee recommendation. Number 7 is the Red Brick Courthouse Structural Repair CIP project. The executive in his January CIP had recommended deferring some of the expenditures up to the FY 28, 29, 30 period. In his March amendments, the CA is now recommending still maintaining a deferral, but is reducing the total cost of the project based on a revised scope. The original scope called for essentially modifications to the building to include ADA requirements, moisture and filtration issues. The current scope in his March amendment is now requiring exterior stabilization of this historical building. It is subject to oversight by the Maryland Historical Society, so DGS will be working the project towards those compliances.
No questions?
Good.
Continue.
Okay, number 8, roof replacement. This again is a level of effort project. The cost increase is due to the addition of 2930 as well as $2.5 million in FY25 to replace the roof at the Lone Oak facility. So no issues there. Staff recommends approval.
Great.
Okay.
Continue.
And finally, there's one project with a technical adjustment. This is the ADA compliance MCG project. The executive as well as the council have made adjustments to this project in past CIPs. Essentially, we are adding FY 2930 as well as reducing FY 27 by $500,000 in order to balance the CIP.
Great.
Okay.
Sounds good.
And just as a footnote, really, we have several pending closeout and closeout projects listed on page 11. These are projects that no longer have active funding in the 6 years. They've been fully funded. Their status, they're in various stages of completion or underway. Committee can ask questions on the status, or we can leave it as it is.
Any questions on the closeout? Nope, no questions there.
Okay, and that's it.
And I think that's an excellent place to end this conversation because of our next conversation item that we're coming up. And so I do want to say thank you to Mr. Mia for the packet and everyone at DGS and OMB for joining us today. And we look forward to continuing the conversation. And we'll see you soon. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, our final item today, we have audit after this, yes, is an OLO report, Planning, Design, and Supervision in the MCG Capital Improvements Program. And I'll ask our staff from OLO to come down, and I'm going to first turn it over to them to do their presentation. We'll have DGS folks are staying with us, and we're being joined by Department of Transportation. And I think, thank you. Oh, thanks. That's okay. And we do have audit right after this, but Mr. DeFazio, I think we have a little wiggle room. Is that correct? Okay. Because I think we left enough time for audit that we don't necessarily need all of that. But since you're in charge of both, it makes it a little easier. So I will turn it over to our OLO office. Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Natalia Carzosa, and this is Blaise DeFazio, and we're with the Office of Legislative Oversight. We appreciate this opportunity to brief the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee on OLO Report 2024-5. We also want to thank the Department of Transportation, the Department of General Services, the Office of Management and Budget, and the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice for the cooperation we received for this report. We can't do our work without them. So first I'm going to talk about the purpose of this report. For context, the term Planning, Design, and Supervision, or PDS, refers to one of 5 cost elements that are reported for individual projects in the county's Capital Improvements Program, or CIP. A cost element is a category of planned expenditures. So the purpose of this OLO report is to describe the processes, costs, and timing associated with PDS in county government CIP projects. The report includes a focus on facility planning projects, which are CIP projects used to study potential capital improvements, and on innovative capital processes in other jurisdictions. So I'm going to begin with just a very quick overview of the CIP. Then I will provide a summary of planning, design, and supervision related tasks and how they fit into CIP processes. Next, I'm going to present our analysis of facility planning projects. And then I'll turn it over to Blaise, who will talk about PDS costs as well as innovative capital processes in other jurisdictions. And finally, he'll go over OLO's recommended discussion items. So starting off with the overview of the CIP. So the Capital Improvements Program, or CIP, describes planned expenditures over a 6-year period by county agencies for capital projects, including public buildings, roads, and other facilities. The council approves a full CIP in each even-numbered calendar year for the upcoming fiscal year and approves an amended CIP in odd-numbered calendar years. For each capital improvement, the CIP includes a project description form, or PDF. So this is an example that you're seeing on the slide. Each PDF includes an expenditure schedule, a funding schedule, and a project description, and this slide focuses on that expenditure schedule. This particular slide shows the expenditure schedule for the Bus Rapid Transit project for Veers Mill Road from the FY24 amended CIP for the 6-year period from FY23 to FY28. And on the left-hand side of the expenditure schedule, you can see the 5 cost elements. Beginning with Planning, Design, and Supervision, PDS, the other cost elements are land, site improvements and utilities, construction, and other. The expenditure schedule displays total planned expenditures that have already occurred or will occur before the 6-year period, and then planned expenditures for each of the 6 years in the 6-year period. For example, here, FY23 and FY24 are years 1 and 2 of the 6-year CIP, and then FY25 through FY28 are years 3, 4, 5, and 6. And these last years, 3 to 6, are often referred to as the out years. This particular OLO project focuses on Montgomery County government. This slide displays total budgeted expenditures in the FY24 amended CIP approved by the Council. And the 6-year budgeted expenditures in this amended CIP for all agencies totaled $5.7 billion. But we focused on the 55% of that, or $3.1 billion, that is for projects administered by Montgomery County government. So now I'm going to present an overview of PDS, Planning, Design, and Supervision. What is it and what percentage of the CIP it represents? But first, let's talk about the life cycle of a typical capital project. Capital projects include a wide range of public infrastructure and facilities. Different types of projects require different processes, but a typical CIP project life cycle includes the following phases. First is facility planning, which is the process of studying potential capital improvements in order to decide whether to move forward with them. During facility planning, a capital improvement has not yet received funding as a standalone project. Next is the project approval and site selection. After that is design, and then finally construction. So within that life cycle, which tasks generate the PDS costs that are included in the PDS cost element? PDS tasks occur throughout the project life cycle. All aspects of facility planning are PDS tasks. This includes data collection and public input, concept plans and feasibility studies, initial design, or the development of a program of requirements, and the development of the cost estimate and project schedule. Project approval, which includes analysis by OMB staff, is also a PDS task. PDS also includes all design and permit costs, and then finally, during construction, PDS tasks include contractor procurement, the supervision of construction, and final inspection. I wanted to highlight one new part of the CIP process that relates to PDS, which is the Capital Budget Equity Tool, which was first implemented in the FY23 CIP cycle. For each CIP, the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice works with OMB to select CIP projects for which departments must implement the Capital Budget Equity Tool. These are the projects which are most likely to have racial equity and social justice impacts. The Capital Budget Equity Tool does require departments to respond to 7 questions about the racial equity and social justice impacts of each selected project, and then the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice scores those responses using a structured rubric to identify projects with the most potential to advance equity in Montgomery County. The Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice provides these summary scores and their recommendations to departments and to the county executive. And one limitation currently of this new tool is that they have not yet been able to implement the Capital Budget Equity Tool for facility planning projects due to a lack of sufficient information. Facility planning is a key stage of project development when departments develop project scopes and gather public input, and so the current Capital Budget Equity Tool process does not address equity in facility planning. That being said, there is some information in the report about some of the ways that departments are partnering with the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice during facility planning. So this slide looks at the breakdown of 6-year budgeted expenditures by cost element over the last 6 full and amended CIPs. Data on aggregated budgeted expenditures by cost element were not available prior to FY19. These data show that PDS accounted for 16% of budgeted expenditures on average. Construction accounted for the majority, 55% of budgeted expenditures. In our OLO report, we focus on DOT and DGS CIP projects. DOT accounts for 59% of CIP budgeted expenditures, and DGS accounts for 22%. So this is really the vast majority of budgeted expenditures in the CIP. So that's why we focused on these two departments. This slide compares CIP project processes for those two departments, and they are pretty similar. They start with facility planning, then do design, and then construction. But we did want to point out one difference in their process, which is that the DOT meets with the T&E committee in the middle of its facility planning process between what they call phase 1 and phase 2. While for DGS, they complete facility planning before bringing projects to the council to be approved as standalone projects. So now I'm going to go over OLO's analysis of the 10 facility planning projects administered by the county government. So I've mentioned before, facility planning is the process of studying potential capital improvements. The CIP includes, as I mentioned, 10 projects that are facility planning projects. A facility planning project provides funding for studies for specific capital improvements. A study aims to gather sufficient information to decide whether to move forward with a capital improvement by funding a standalone project. Each study aims to develop initial design plans and cost and schedule estimates, and it also includes community outreach and public input. This slide offers an overview of all the budgeted expenditures for facility planning in the FY24 CIP. There were $30 million in 10 facility planning projects for the 6-year period, and of that, $17 million was for DOT administered projects, $10 million was for a DEP facility planning project for stormwater management, $1.6 million was for DGS's MCG facility planning project, and then $750,000 was for DHCA's housing and community development facility planning project. We focused again on the DOT and DGS studies because of their impact on the overall CIP. And so this slide looks at our overall analysis of the facility planning studies included in DOT and DGS's facility planning projects. And what we did is we looked at the individual studies that they did over the last 10 years and what happened to them. Overall, between DOT and DGS, there were 100 studies for specific improvements. As of FY24, 28 of those had ended without becoming standalone projects, and a few of those are ones that weren't intended to become standalone projects which are being done by private developers, but there's also a natural aspect of the facility planning process, which is that it is intended to study whether to move forward with a project, so some of them are not going to move forward. 30 were currently in progress or candidate studies as of the writing of the report. 12 of the DOT studies are ones that are listed as candidate studies, but they never got to the point of starting the study. And then 30 of the 100 studies generated standalone projects. We also looked at what happened to those that did become standalone projects. Delays were pretty common, with 12 of the 30 experiencing delays of at least 1 year since the creation of the standalone project. Cost increases were also common, with 18 of the 30 projects showing cost increases since they were first created. We did note that 7 of the projects were initially created as standalone projects without any funding other than PDS costs, meaning there was no estimate or placeholder for construction costs, which, as we said, generate the majority of costs. So these projects these 7 projects include the projects that have resulted in the largest cost increases, because the initial cost estimate didn't include the largest category of costs. And then finally, based on current estimated completion dates for these projects, we find that the total life cycle from planning to completion ranges from 4 to 21 years. So this is a really big range that depends a lot on the scope of the project. We did want to note that DOT is working to reduce this time frame with a new CIP project approved by the Council in FY23, which is Transportation Feasibility Studies, and this project provides for streamlined planning and initial design for transportation capital facilities, with the aim of identifying more quickly whether a project should move forward or not. So now I'm going to turn it over to Blaise, who will go over PDS costs.
Okay. Thanks, Nat. To get a better understanding of the planning, design, and supervision costs for county projects, we reviewed expenditures from all DOT and DGS administered projects from FY16 to FY23. When looking at the costs from FY16 to FY23, DOT tends to have slightly more invested into PDS among its projects compared to DGS. And DOT also dedicated more design expenditures, 68% of PDS versus 49% of PDS for DGS, with a focus on engineering and architectural services for transportation projects. DOT also relies more on contractual services for PDS, while DGS slightly uses staff more than contractors. When we interviewed other local counties such as Howard and Prince George's, it was a similar mix of staff and contractor use. As for DGS and DOT staffing for capital projects, both primarily charge their personnel costs to CIP. This is done by spreading out project manager costs across projects, which could be complicated. That is because while the staff remains constant, the project's funding and planned expenditures shift from year to year. Therefore, it causes both DOT and DGS to look for capacity to fund staff at times for projects, even if some project managers aren't directly related to a project. Another less complicated way to account for staff charges to the CIP is to have a separate project dedicated to department staffing. This is how MCPS manages their staff, making it easier to manage costs without allocation calculations. But individual projects' true costs, which would include staffing, would not be fully accounted for. So we also looked at innovative capital processes that might improve or strengthen the county's current capital improvements program practices. We focused on 4 areas: including equity with capital budget prioritization, furthering equitable and inclusive planning and involvement, creating a fiscally unrestricted capital plan, and utilizing digital tools. Although the county has the capital budget equity tool it began using for FY23, we explored additional ways to include equity. For including equity in project prioritization pre-CIP, we looked at Baltimore's Department of Public Works project selection tool, which uses a distinctive quadruple bottom approach, which applies equity and performance lenses to 4 categories: environmental, social, economic, and operational. Once projects go through the process, they can be analyzed, and a decision can be made if a project needs to be redesigned to higher impacts or equity outcomes. We also reviewed Baltimore's Department of Planning's CIP distribution analysis. This analysis occurs after the projects are completed. Projects are looked at by the percentage of dollars mapped by agency, the per capita investment by community statistical area, and investments by race and income. Another area we focused on was innovative ways to enhance community engagement, especially in underserved or unrepresented areas. The City of Philadelphia created the participatory budgeting approach, in which community members brainstorm ideas, develop proposals with city assistance, and vote on how a set amount of funding is spent on capital projects, which are then fully funded and implemented. As for more inclusion in the wider CIP, the City of Oakland makes it a point to reach out to communities who are unrepresented in previous capital budget outreach by holding targeted meetings intentionally in districts with higher Black, Indigenous, and people of color proportions, low-income families, and non-English speakers, and contacting a considerable number of community centers, nonprofits, churches, and community-based organizations to share meeting information or speak at one of the meetings. An interesting approach we also looked at is a fiscally unrestricted capital plan. This is a plan where all long-term capital needs are identified first, regardless of funding. From those needs, projects are funded in the shorter-term capital improvement plan and subsequently removed from the capital plan. Then a transparent list of needs remains in the capital plan and could be drawn from when funding is available in the CIP. 2 examples we looked at were from San Francisco and from New Jersey. So in order to finalize projects for its 5-year capital improvement program, the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency first reviews the capital plan, closely looks at potential projects with an emphasis on resources and funding, and then refines the projects for the capital improvement program. The agency will then revise the capital plan, removing approved capital improvement program projects. New Jersey Transit takes a different approach from the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency for how it publishes its unfunded projects. Instead of adjusting a capital plan, it simply adds an appendix of unfunded projects to its 5-year capital improvement plan. Finally, we looked at other digital tools that might be available in addition to what the county currently uses. For the City of Oakland, residents are encouraged to submit ideas through an online portal, and those submissions are tracked and utilized by the city. These requests are individually responded to, go to the corresponding department, and they are considered alongside or integrated into a department proposal. For the City of Baltimore, they use ArcGIS software to provide the public an interactive map showing the results of CIP distribution analysis. Using the map, residents can view the per capita allocations for projects and view specific projects and total CIP allocation associated with each project. Overall, OLO recommended 4 discussion items. The first item is to consider altering how personnel costs are charged across DOT and DGS administered projects. We do want to note that Finance indicated that as a best practice from an accounting and tax-exempt debt issuance perspective to allocate personnel to individual projects. The second item is to consider whether DGS should have a preliminary review of the capital projects with the Council, similar to the Department of Transportation. It may be beneficial for the Council to work with DGS in the middle of the facility planning process like DOT. DGS currently has a review process established for affordable housing and reports it to Council. This process can be expanded. For the third item, discuss whether to require that budget project expenditures in the CIP include estimates or placeholders for future construction costs, rather than funding some projects with PDS cost only and adding funding for a later date. In review of facility planning projects, we identified projects that just got PDS funded, and the cost estimates for those projects have increased significantly since the projects were created. Finally, the last item is to consider innovative changes to increase equity and transparency, which were highlighted in the previous slides. The fiscally unrestricted plan is an interesting option since it could show unfunded projects in a published document instead of pushing projects to the out years and beyond 6 years. So thank you. This concludes the presentation, and we'll turn the discussion back to the committee chair.
Great. Thank you so much. It's a great report, and I appreciate the succinct going through it, and particularly Ms. Carrizosa, the first part of it. I want to take the first part of your presentation and actually send that to some residents and some of our newer staff, because I think it is an excellent description of the process, which can be quite confusing for people. We talk in a language of PDFs and facility planning, and people talk in the language of I want my project to move forward. And so I think you did, having that background and explanation, I think is excellent. So appreciate that. Before I turn to my colleagues, I just wanted to see if representatives from DOT, DGS, or OMB wanted to say a few words, reactions.
No, I don't. I think the report is pretty complete. We worked with, and I know DOT staff did as well, worked with OLO very cordially throughout this. We certainly are going to be able to respond to questions I know you have, so nothing more from me. Chris?
Just a couple items. One, the differences in the PDS experience between DOT and DGS are not particularly surprising to us. The projects are very different. Our projects are linear. We have a lot of permitting requirements that are different than a site project that DGS might administer. So those are in line with what we would expect. The other thing I'd just like to comment on is the long life cycle of the projects that's highlighted in the report, and we have been making a number of changes to process to try to shorten those. It is possible to shorten those life cycles for smaller projects, and that's why we have been proposing to council on time to time to skip a phase 2 of facility planning and move right into having a project, because that reduces some of the duration, and also the feasibility studies process for much smaller projects where we can move more quickly from having a need identified to a project and cut some years out of that timeline, because the duration of these projects is a major element in the cost escalation, scope change in requirements, change in community needs. So that's a major element of focus for us in trying to manage this PDS expenditure.
And also pointing council members to the pages 8 and 9 of the report, in which executive staff responded to these recommendations from OLO. Will substantially clarify some of our comments as well.
Great. Thank you. So before getting into the discussion items, just want to see if any of my colleagues have any questions about the report and what was done. No? Okay, no questions there. I do want to acknowledge we were joined by folks who are here for our audit committee. So as you can see, we're running late. But this is a great discussion for you to hear as well. But all right, let's turn now to some of the discussion items, and obviously colleagues can bring in some of the others. I don't know if we want to dig in more on the personnel costs given the response we received already in the written one, but does anyone have any other questions on that? Otherwise, I was going to skip to number 2, if that's okay. Okay, great. So number 2 was discuss whether DGS should establish a preliminary review of capital projects with council similar to DOT. I think we just heard from Director Conklin how some of these projects are different that DOT does versus DGS, but didn't know, Director Dice, if you had thoughts on that.
I do. Director Conklin, I think, described the differences succinctly, because these are sort of one-stops. And just to point out to council that discussion that we had in 3 sessions before this is an opportunity where council, when we bring the capital improvement program and projects go into feasibility, these are the projects, frankly, that are in facility planning are often projects added by council members, and we report on those. It's also been pointed out, and I'll reiterate, that council, we have to come back to council and report on the feasibility of both child care and affordable housing. And I recognize that that was a requirement imposed just in the last year, something we did anyway. Now it's a formal report. And then when we come back for funding on those projects, I can talk about some of that in more detail under discussion on item 3. But the council does get input from us on those projects. But once that's done, then we start POR development, and from there into, we get the funding after a POR, because I don't know what the project's going to cost until a formal POR is established, and that's when we will come for actual appropriation of funds. So at those delivery points, milestones, if you will, that's where council already receives updates and inputs on projects from DGS.
Okay. Yeah. Councilmember.
The only thing I wanted to add is that POR is the program of requirement.
Thank you.
And,
Just
to your point earlier, Madam Vice President, that is part of the discussion that we need to have. We need to let the public feel a part of this, not just the initials. Thanks.
Granted, that to further define it, the program of requirements defines the space, and not the configuration, not necessarily the final design, but the space needs in relationship of those spaces, hallways, corridors, whether we go out, whether we go up, are all factors that are considered in the requirements that are generally and primarily stipulated by the client department, police, fire, libraries, recreation. And we get all that input, and then as a collaborative team, compile this program of requirements that is then subsequently circulated among the departments and stakeholders, finance, OMB, and finally DGS to finalize and publish that document.
Councilmember Lukey?
Just in terms of the statistics regarding the life cycle of projects you looked at, and again, I want to thank you both for all of your hard work and the many, many other people you had to work with in order to bring this together, so I really appreciate that. It seemed to be like a third, and a third, meaning a third moved forward, a third were studied and determined not to be appropriate, or, you know, there was a reason why we were not moving forward, and then there was the middle group. And I wasn't sure, because it's not represented necessarily in the charts in the report, but whether that breakdown of percentages tended to remain fairly consistent over time each fiscal year, meaning if you were to take another snapshot, that it always, over like a 5-year span, yielded kind of similar results, or whether we've seen fluctuation in that over time.
So that's a really good question. I have not done the analysis that way. 10 years feels like a long time, but it's actually not that much. And so it's a little bit, I think to make that meaningful, we would need to look at a pretty long period of time, but I think that's an interesting question.
Yeah, and I'd just be curious if you did that, if you find that there are certain types of projects where the study phase is, how do you say, more dispositive of a not moving forward, right? Versus, so whether more of those are in the DOT arena than in the DGS, sorry, I have juvenile services on my brain for other reasons, DGS arena, and understanding that mix could be better. And of course, understanding that 1/3 of the CIP budget goes to MCPS CIP projects, which were not included in this study, but you know, from other discussions, whether it's at full council or whether it's with the ENC committee, I know there's been some interest in with the executive branch of making things more standardized between MCPS's CIP budgeting and the regular executive branch budgeting.
And just to respond to your question about which types of projects tend to move forward and which ones don't, I do believe if you look at the breakdown that recognizing that DOT and DGS projects are very different, there was a larger percentage of DOT projects that were ones that didn't move forward. And then within that, I believe it was roads and then mass transit excluding bus rapid transit that were less likely to move forward compared with pedestrian facilities and bikeways and the bus rapid transit.
And Director Conklin, I'm assuming that's because of funding challenges or funding streams and what is or isn't available?
Yeah, funding challenges are a big component of that. For the mass transit projects that were in this sample, there were a number of park and ride facilities that included structured parking.
Right.
And there was no obvious funding source to make that investment, so those studies didn't advance the projects. Most of the ped and bike projects are paths parallel to existing roads, and those have moved forward more readily. In the road projects, actually several of them became standalone capital projects, but then met a demise later in their life cycle due to funding constraints or changing priorities of the council. The notable ones of those are Montrose Parkway East and Goshen Road, which some of those are still in process in some ways to address issues that are present on those corridors without pursuing the major reconstructions that were envisioned in those other capital projects.
And is there, and this is a question for both departments, if you will, but are there things that could be done to give your departments greater agility in inserting things in the CIP when there's state or federal dollars available that would help expedite the projects that we receive outside funding for?
I don't know that there's really a process change needed for that. It may be that we, for example, accelerate facility planning and skip a phase 2 when we have a large component of outside funding. In the last cycle, there were a number of state funding decisions that we incorporated into the capital budget, and most of those went and skipped our facility planning stage and went right into standalone capital projects because the money was specific for a specific solution in a specific location. So we didn't need to go through those early steps, but that worked with existing processes the council and executive employ to manage those. And I see Ms. Silberman has some comments on this
I'd also say that often state funding and federal funding is most available for projects that have already gone through facility planning. We have a good idea of what we're advocating for, and that's what tends to get on that state priorities list. So it would be sort of the exception that we're getting significant state funding for something that has not gone through some level of facility planning.
Right.
Let me just add two sides of the coin. Yes, sometimes external funding sources can accelerate a project. The diversion center is a good example of that. Moves to the front of the line because of the timing, not only just the need, but many of these needs we've been aware of for decades. And sometimes the deliberative process, particularly with public input, is a good thing. The Justice Center that we would have built when I first came here 17 years ago, what we didn't do because of bidding errors, and it was an opportunity to then stop and sit back and think, what do we really want this to be? So that project's been going on for 17 years. When we did the ribbon cutting for the Wheaton Library and Recreation Center, one of the residents came up and said, we've been wanting a recreation center. We've been advocating for one for 20 years. Well, you know, if I had built it 20 years ago, it wouldn't be what it is today, which was a far better facility. So sometimes that deliberative process, that's all staff charging to PD&S, getting consultants to come and do test fits and things like that adds to that. And we actually track the percentage of PDS by project so we can compare and can relate to another great example is the Noise Library, which right now has got a phenomenally large amount of PD&S, and we haven't done anything yet because of all the studies and efforts. So those are good things, actually, but sometimes no one's more frustrated with bureaucratic processes than I am, but sometimes that external federal and state funding can accelerate attention.
I know we're going to talk about transparency as one of the other discussion questions, so I'm going to hold on that.
Great. Thank you. And I think I appreciate the response, and I would just say that getting the reports and everything are excellent, and then and we can talk also to our central staff, but sometimes lifting up projects proactively, even if there's not a formal review like we have with DOT and the Transportation and Environment Committee. I'm not thinking of anything in particular, but
we do provide. I meet monthly with the entire DGS team to do a capital project update, and we produce a report, a copy of which is provided. I don't know exactly where it goes, but council members can look at that as the status of every single project we're working on. And we can make sure you get a copy.
We'll make sure we get a copy.
Yeah.
It may be going somewhere. But let's make sure. And Director Dice, I will say this is not the first time that you have talked to us about a report. I think it was also with the Transportation and Environment Committee on the buildings energy upgrades. And that's a wonderful report that I'm not sure we were getting before, or where it was ending up in what email boxes.
We'll make sure we send a copy to each office.
Yeah, that would be excellent.
Okay, sure.
Appreciate that. One of the other discussion items, and I think this is excellent that we are bringing this up here about budgeted projects, expenditures in the CIP, and whether or not to put estimates or placeholders for future construction costs. I mean, this is a conversation we've had in this committee. The Education and Culture Committee is having it, looking at MCPS CIP. It's a conversation I think that's happening across the board as we're looking at our CIP and how we basically manage it for the long term. And so first I just turn over to you all to see if there was any feedback on that discussion point.
I would say that this is really a critically important feature to include the placeholder construction funding in order to ensure that we do have a structurally balanced CIP and that we don't sort of move in a direction where we cannot fulfill the commitments that the council has made. There are some exceptions where it really is difficult to do that. For example, the bus depot that you all just discussed is one where we only have PD&S because the shape of that deal is very uncertain at this point, so it would be extremely difficult to do that. And I know there are a few transportation projects that also fall into that category, especially those that have significant federal funding. But by and large, it really is our practice and our commitment to programming those placeholder dollars for construction.
Yeah, the only thing that I was going to add to that, and I totally agree with everything Ms. Silverman said, is that it may be worthwhile for us in the fiscal notes to put something about the source of the estimate, the confidence level of the estimate, and the timing of the estimate, because a lot of our projects have estimates that you're looking at in the CIP that were developed at the beginning of the life cycle of the project, and the project has been stalled for fiscal capacity reasons for a long time. And the estimate's not really reliable, but it is at least holding some capacity should the council ever choose to move those projects forward. But there's a lot of difficulty in the estimating and making sure that the capital budget reserves capacity for the projects the council intends to be built.
Yeah,
We
I think
actually
that's-
have these discussions internal to the executive branch for every single project, because my caution, as we were just talking about the timeframes for projects, we provide in general, and of the statistics cited, it indicates the majority of the projects do come with an estimate. We base that estimate on our prior experience of similar projects, because we build a lot of the same things, and also industry standards. But you council members, in fact, all council members are well acquainted with how numbers that we estimated in 2019 bear absolutely no resemblance whatsoever to numbers we're getting in 2024. So my caution to my OMB colleagues when asked for a placeholder number is to underscore it's a placeholder and bears no resemblance to what it may eventually be. We have had, I forget the library, we had a library project whose estimate was a placeholder 10 years ago, and we came up with the final numbers based upon the final POR and final estimates on current data. It was almost twice, because time moves on. You frequently see items in the CIP because of just inflationary factors. We estimate projects to midpoint of construction, not just when bid opening, but midpoint, and in order to take into account inflationary factors. But any number we can't come up with is a placeholder until we award a contract.
Yeah, and I'll turn it over to Council President Friedson in a moment, but I think Director Conklin, you're right. I think more information that could be provided about the assumptions that go into that estimate, and then also when we don't have one, why we don't have one, I think would be very helpful. Council President Friedson?
Thank you. This is, from a fiscal standpoint, this is like the essential piece of this entire conversation. So I'm glad we're honing in and focusing on it. I understand the point of, if you have an estimate that's 10 years old, it's pretty much meaningless. The challenge that we get is that we make every other decision based on a 10-year-old meaningless number, and we don't reassess it until we're ready to move to the next piece, and then all of a sudden it's shocking to everybody involved, with the least shocking of information, that a construction estimate from 10 years ago is no longer accurate, and then all of a sudden it's the government can't run anything, or look at all these cost overruns, and the reality is it's the private market that in the economy that has changed in terms of construction costs. And so we set ourselves up for failure in every possible way. We've set unrealistic expectations for what we can and can't fund, and we make ourselves look incompetent, frankly, because it looks like we have created cost overruns when in fact we are unfortunately the recipient of the reality that every other organization, private, public, and otherwise, experience. So one of two things I think needs to happen, and I think I appreciate the adding more information into the description, but I don't think that's going to solve the problem. I think it's not unhelpful. I think it would be somewhat helpful for those who are digging in, but the headline news is going to be, here's the number, here's how much it went up, and the assumptions that we make and the decisions that we make are not going to be based on soberly reading each description and baking in what those descriptions mean. I think either since many of the projects that we do are the same or similar, we should have a standardized assumption of cost of a type of project based on a metric, and that should be redone every on year of the CIP for every single project in the CIP. So it shouldn't be just on the new projects that we add to the CIP, we use the number that you all spend a lot of time figuring out. It should be recalculating every single number so that we figure that out and we know what the numbers are. Or we should literally go through and recalculate on a project by project basis every on year, what those new estimates are going to be. My sense is that some of that is done already, but it's not done on the whole CIP, because we do run into these issues where we have 10-year-old, like we should never have a 10-year-old number. Like one way or another, it doesn't have to be a perfect number, but there should be a number that keeps up with the known rises in construction costs. So I'd like to, we're not going to solve this today. I'd like to hear your views on that. But I do think that between the executive branch agencies, DGS being probably the lead agency on this, but also DOT and the others that are involved, and budget, finance, and otherwise, work with this committee and figure out what is our approach to this, because we've all acknowledged that there is an issue. We all acknowledge that we want to solve the issue, but we don't really have a plan for how we're going to address this in future capital budgets. And I think we need an approach, either a one-size-fits-all, here's what this type of project is, here's what we're calculating. It's an imperfect number, but it is reflective of the current economic dynamics and gives us a pretty good sense of affordability for the out years, or literally recalculating every single project every 2 years, because that is, when you have an on year, that's what the capital budget is supposed to be telling us. How much is this actually going to cost, so that we don't get the, well, that was a 10-year-old number, here's the new number, and all of a sudden it's has to go to out beyond 6 years because it can't possibly be funded.
So just to clarify, you're talking about projects that have not yet begun, because the CIP includes projects that are underway. Those don't need to be refreshed. We have those numbers. But for projects that have not yet begun, the aforementioned 10-year-old number, we don't have any objection to that. We actually keep track of numbers. We do have, as I said, we base our estimates absent of a POR on approximate square footage, cost per square foot of 22,000 square foot library. Here's what the last 3 libraries have cost, and here's what market conditions are right now. That's how we formulate those things, and we keep that updated fairly regularly, and could do that. I'll defer to OMB on the logistics of that.
Yeah, I would say for almost all projects, we do update escalation in every full cycle. And so those, whatever the agreed upon escalation adjustment is applied to almost all projects. There may be a few exceptions that I'm not thinking of at the moment. I think a big problem we run into is when you have significant market changes like we've had recently that are not captured in your typical escalation adjustment, and that, or there have been in 10 years there could be a significant change in the vision for a project that when we go to design we are seeing a significant cost difference. But I do take there are significant increases that we're not capturing in that escalation adjustment that we should think about figuring out how to capture.
Yeah, I think that's the key issue that I'm trying to address, and I think we should, in collaboration, figure out what is the approach to that. But I do think we never should be blind in an on-year, off-year, every 2-year CIP. The idea that we're ever blindsided by 10-year macro level increases in construction costs, like that's a solvable problem that we should work on together, come up with a policy and an approach for how we address that. The change in scope, you can't control against the political dynamics of us saying we want you to do something else, right? That's our fault. That's our problem. We got to figure out how we're going to fund that and prioritize that. That's not that's not on you. But I think it's on all of us to figure out, okay, let's know what at least we're talking about as a baseline. And I do think, depending on where the project is in its life cycle as part of the CIP, particularly those that are in the out years, we aren't capturing some of that. And then we are blindsided, at least from a macro level fiscal standpoint, of, boy, construction costs have really gone up. We didn't capture it in these handful of projects. And that's $100 million that we don't know where to find in the 3 out years. So again, I don't think we're going to solve it today. I'd love to hear from DOT briefly on this, but I do think that coming back on this particular point, coming up with a specific approach to how we address it, that would be a way to operationalize this recommendation, which I think is critical, and I think it's reflective to the chair's point of the conversation that we're having with MCPS, the conversation we're having, other places. In that sense, it's more of not including known costs like systemics than known inflationary increases, but it's the same point. It's the same argument of, we're setting unrealistic expectations, putting things in a CIP in the out years that we have no real path to affording and paying for.
I was going to say two things. I'm not arguing with anything you've said because I agree with the points you've made, but there's, in a lot of these projects, a period of dormancy of 4 or 5 years, and those are the projects where these inflationary pressures tend to get missed because there's no work budgeted, so no work is happening on those projects by our staff during those times. So you could do a placeholder approach to those to keep them current. The other element is in the throes of the final assembly of the CIP, between now and May, there's usually a lot of adjustments to project schedules and timing of expenditures that can drive cost changes. And oftentimes these adjustments never occur in those reconciliation processes, both on our side and your side, where those last minute adjustments are made within the 6 years and to beyond the 6 years. So that creates a lot of the challenge.
When we have to push projects out to reconcile both, in May, we don't make adjustments for escalation. That is something that we have to catch up in the following full year. So that's part of this equation.
Yeah, I wanted to add on to what Chris was saying, because in that process, I can think of a particular tunnel, not to bring up the history with it, but that was a project that we tried to communicate.
Digging yourself a hole here for that tunnel.
Well, there's going to be
speaking of tunnels generally, because they all follow the same pattern.
But that was one where we tried to communicate. If
I assume you're referring to the Forest Glen Passageway, not the Capitol Crossing Trail Tunnel.
That was one we tried to communicate. If you push it out, it costs more.
Yeah.
If you bring it up, we also made the point, if you slide it back up, de-escalate those costs to take out the inflation that we had built in.
Right.
But that needs to happen throughout this process as part of that.
I think that's an important point. I would love to address both of these issues if we can. I mean, I hear your point, and maybe having a policy and an approach to that when we move things into out years in order to reconcile, that comes with the annualized inflationary increase over the last X number of years. Just, again, these are not going to be perfect numbers, but they at least reflect the reality that costs go up. And to assume that if you move $10 million out of FY25 and you move it into FY26, that doesn't actually cost $10 million in FY26. It costs $10.5 million in FY26, or whatever the case may be. But I think approaching both of those, and Director Conklin, to your point, the dormancy projects, those 4 or 5 years of dormancy, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Those are the ones that we aren't going back to specifically, that no one is being asked to recalculate, that then the 4 or 5 years dormancy that was built in, and then the 3 or 4 years of delays because of reconciling of the CIP and cost constraints, all of a sudden you're 8, 9 years after, 10 years after when the last actual serious cost estimate occurred. And boy, it blows it out of the water and we get caught off guard. So that's where I think having some reasonable approach, perhaps not perfect, but better than nothing, is what we're doing now, of saying, we're not going to, do a full re-engineering cost estimate, full on, but we're going to have an approach to how we address that issue so that we're not assuming nothing is happening in terms of the cost of that project, because that's not realistic and serious at all.
So I think what I'm hearing, there's general agreement, and we are a half hour behind. And so we do have folks for the audit here that I suggest that, and Mr. Mia, because you are here, I think this falls in your bailiwick to follow up with OMB and just really think about how we can proceed with this moving forward. And I think this does add to the transparency piece Ms. Lukey was talking about, and Councilmember Katz, super fast.
Very fast. I think, is there software somewhere that updates this without a whole lot of staff time? Because I don't know the amount of staff time you would have to work on these dormant projects to update it every 15 minutes.
No, it's not systematized that way now. So there is staff time working on the dormant projects to carry them from year to year. And that's an element we've submitted an amendment in March that proposes deleting a project. Part of that is we are maintaining a project that doesn't look like it's ever going to happen, and there is a cost to doing that. It's not reflected in the analysis.
There's a cost, and we're going to have to move on. But bottom line on this thing is, at some point, it becomes a fiction novel, what we see, because it's not true numbers. But to Mr. Dice's point earlier, there's many projects that have changed over the time, and thank goodness they did, because if we had built them 20 years ago, it would not have been the project that you needed today. So there's got to be a spot, when they used to have graph paper, there has to be a spot on that graph paper where this thing can come together. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Yeah, Councilmember Lukey.
Just as we're wrapping up, since it sounds like you're going to come back and have some more discussions about this, this is a big topic. On the transparency issue, my ask is when you come back, given the information that OLO included in the report about how things are made more transparent from a public perspective and explainable to the public, as we noted, these acronyms and processes are complex for the average citizen to understand, but they really do care about what is or isn't happening in their particular part of the county. If you could come back to us with some ideas about how that could be operationalized within your two different houses, if you will, for those different capital projects, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. And there was, I don't want to short shift, but for sake of time and knowing that we are in the throes of budget right now, and the idea of new things is hard to, I think, wrap our heads around. But I do want to note the final chapter of this report that did look at comparisons to other places and what folks are doing. I appreciate raising participatory budgeting, because I think that's an exciting place that hopefully at some point our county could undertake something like that. But I would like to come back to this at a later date, maybe week after budget. We can have this conversation that we just had and then revisit some of the ideas that other places around the region are looking at that we may adopt. I do think what you're hearing is not just the estimates and approaching them, but these dormant projects and how we're dealing with them. And again, just to underscore what my colleagues have said, is that when we're communicating with the public and there are projects that we know are dormant, we know they're not going forward, or they're going to go forward in such a different way, we need to be treating these differently than we are right now. And how we do that is not easy. And so, but I think we have to have some honest conversations about that. And I'd like to return to this after we get through budget and over the summer, when I think all of us have a little bit more brain power and openness to think about different ideas and doing things a little differently. So I just want to thank all of you for coming today and participating in what I know was a great back and forth with the staff at OLO to create this excellent report. And I do want to thank you for this report, and I look forward, because I think it's going to generate a lot of conversations moving forward. So I appreciate that we started the conversation today and that we will come back to it as well. And thank you, Councilmember Lukey, for the impetus for this and pushing it forward. So with that, the Government Operations Fiscal Policy Committee is now adjourned, and I think we can just roll right in, because we are it, to the Audit Committee today, and we have our audit that we're going to review and a contract. Oh, we have to wait 2 minutes. I have to wait 2 minutes.